Good evening. You're watching London Live News at 6 with Tanya Francis. Coming up tonight, the changing story over Chris Pincher allegations. Claims Boris Johnson was made aware of his chief whip's misconduct allegations. An inquiry finds Jermaine Baker was lawfully killed by police as his mother speaks out, saying she disagrees with the ruling. We'll have an update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. Plus, helping the homeless get into the world of work, a new initiative hoping to open doors for those struggling. And we'll hear about the new film tackling the issue of mental health in top-level football. All of that on the way, but first tonight, an inquiry into the death of Jermaine Baker has found that the unarmed father of two was lawfully killed by a firearms officer during a foiled prison break. However, the inquiry found police made numerous failures in the planning and execution of the operation. Baker was fatally shot as he sat in the front passenger seat of a stolen car near Wood Green Crown Court in North London in December 2015 by police, who suspected he and the others in the car were about to free a dangerous prisoner from a custody van. Well, Jermaine was unarmed at the time. He was shot by a counter-terrorism specialist firearms officer who told the inquiry he thought Mr. Baker was reaching for a weapon. An imitation firearm was found in the rear of the Audi following the shooting. Well, after the verdict, Jermaine's mother said she could not understand the ruling, given the amount of evidence she had heard over the last 2 months.
You know what, I thought there was some sort of joke. I thought it was just some sort of joke because I couldn't understand after hearing all that evidence for 2 months how he can conclude that. You know, and initially I was really upset and I literally threw the report and I got up and I left. And then, you know, then I felt like, okay, you know, I've done this for 6.5 years. I need to get myself back in that room and I need to continue this fight. I've got to see what it is he's saying. And then we went on to read his very, very contradictory report. Because that's what it is, it's very contradictory. He says the Met has had multiple failings under this operation, but yet these failings do not contribute to cause Jermaine's death. That can't be okay, because a failing is a failing, a life is a life. That, to me, that contributes towards my son's death.
That was Jermaine Baker's mother there. Well, the Met Police have released a statement in regards to the ruling and have said the inquiry report criticises how the operation was carried out, but that these failures did not cause Mr. Baker's death, and the officer was reasonable to assume that someone in the vehicle would be armed. Well, since his death, the Met have made changes to how the firearms unit is run and how the officers are trained. Now, in other news, Downing Street have said Boris Johnson forgot that Chris Pincher was the subject of an official complaint. The former Deputy Chief Whip was accused of groping 2 men at a private members' club. The complaint was upheld but did not lead to any formal investigation or disciplinary action. Number 10 had previously claimed that Mr. Johnson had not been aware of any specific allegations after Mr. Pincher's dramatic resignation last week. But since, claims have come out that he was informed. A former civil servant at the Foreign Office, Lord MacDonald, has said Mr. Johnson was briefed in person. Following this, Paymaster General Michael Ellis spoke in Parliament when questioned about the mechanisms for upholding standards in public life.
There are bodies and there are office holders with a role in overseeing specific aspects of public life, such as the Parliamentary Commissioner on Standards, the Civil Service Commission, the Commissioner for Public Appointments, and alongside these there are regimes for the publication of government transparency data and information on those who lobby government. So we do have a Parliament, Mr. Speaker, as you know, that upholds standards to cover all of those in public life. But it is incumbent upon us not to prejudge these decisions. Ministers, public office holders, officials in all of their activities must maintain the confidentiality of those who wish to make complaints across the lifetime of their involvement. But let me say that no system can replace the fundamental importance of personal responsibility. We all know this to be true. Codes and rules and oversight bodies are there to guide us, but we all ultimately in public life must choose for ourselves how to act.
Well, Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner also spoke, saying that these latest disclosures revealed an ethical vacuum in the heart of Downing Street.
These latest disturbing allegations about the ministerial misconduct are all about abuse of power. And there is one common fault, Mr. Speaker, with the system currently that the Minister spoke about, and that's the power that's granted by this Prime Minister. The Minister spoke about personal responsibility. Well, the Minister needs to remind the Prime Minister of his personal responsibility. Last week, the Prime Minister said that he knew nothing of specific allegations about misconduct by the member for Tamworth. Then he claimed he had only been aware of reports and speculation. But, Mr. Speaker, the truth is out today, and that defence has been completely blown apart. Lord MacDonald says the Prime Minister was informed about the complaint that was upheld of inappropriate behaviour against the then Minister. Does the Minister here accept Lord MacDonald is telling the truth? Or is he telling us the Prime Minister wasn't aware of it? What happened to the complaint, Mr. Speaker, and why was nothing done at the time? A Minister of State at the Foreign Office has a deeply sensitive role in national security. Was this issue even raised or brought up in the vetting process, and was the Prime Minister informed? And why was this conduct not considered a breach of the ministerial code?
Well, the latest there from that story. Now on to some other news. A 35-year-old man from Beckton has been charged with the murder of Wayne Potter, a 39-year-old man who was found unresponsive at his home on Saturday. Police were called to the property close to London City Airport following reports of a disturbance. Well, Potter died a short while after, with a post-mortem showing that he died of injuries to the head and abdomen. Well, Ross Pallett, who has been charged with murder, is due to appear at Thames Magistrates Court. A body has been found in a lake in Ilford during a police search of Fairlop waters. Well, police were called to the area following concerns for the safety of a 17-year-old boy. It's been reported he willingly entered the water to go for a swim but never returned. Well, the death is being treated as unexpected and the lake remains closed to the public while the police continue their inquiries. Now, here in London, activists from the group Just Stop Oil have glued themselves to the Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper painting in the Royal Academy this afternoon, making this the fifth time in a week that they've done something like this at a major art gallery in the UK. 5 protesters attached themselves to the frame and the words "No New Oil" were spray painted in white letters on the red plinth under the painting. Well, the campaigners are calling on the government to halt new oil and gas licences in the UK and for the directors, employees and members of the art institutions across the UK to join them in protest. Now, the Mayor of London has been accused of misleading the public over how much is actually being saved by moving City Hall to East London. Sadiq Khan claimed the move from South Bank to the Royal Docks would save over £61 million over the next 5 years. But the Greater London Authority's Oversight Committee have said that the figure is actually closer to £37 million. Well, the move to the new offices happened in March and after months of delay, and a spokesperson for the Mayor is challenging the committee's figures. Now, a sad day for any EastEnders fans as Mona Hammond, best known for playing Blossom Jackson, has died at the age of 91. The Jamaican-British actress was in the soap from 1994 to 1997 and played the no-nonsense grandmother. Tributes have been posted across social media, calling her a trailblazer, an inspiration and a queen. Well, thoughts are with her family today. Let's take a look at the weather now. A fine evening ahead with temperatures dropping down to 8 degrees overnight. Tomorrow will be a cloudy start but will remain dry and will heat up as the day goes on with lots of sunshine and highs of 25 degrees. We're looking ahead, it's much the same for Thursday and the weekend weather also looking good, warm with light winds. We are taking a short break, but next, today marks 74 years of the NHS and the launch of their first 5G hospital. More on that next.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back. On to some of the day's main headlines from across the country now. The UK's car industry is suffering its worst month for new car sales since 1996. This is also coupled with global shortages of supplies, making it difficult for manufacturers to fulfill the demand. While new figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders show drivers are having to wait more than 12 months to receive certain vehicles. Well, the chief executive of the society has said the delay on new car orders and the rise in energy bills is increasing manufacturing costs, resulting in longer waiting times on cars, which will cost more to buy. One of the UK's biggest supermarkets has reported that customers are switching to own brand products and cutting back on non-essential spending as prices continue to rise. Sainsbury's boss Simon Roberts has said new figures indicate households are struggling with the cost of living, and it's being reflected in their shopping habits. The supermarket's sales fell 4% in the 16 weeks to the 25th of June compared with last year, with bosses saying that they are doing everything they can to keep prices as low as possible. The NHS has announced that drones are going to be used to courier chemotherapy drugs from Portsmouth to a hospital on the Isle of Wight. The pilot scheme aims to speed up the delivery of vital medicines and allow for same-day delivery across the country. Well, if successful, it's believed it will be a world first and will reduce delivery time from 4 hours to 30 minutes. Well, one drone flight will replace a ferry and 2 trips in the car per delivery. Now, staying with the NHS, today not only marks 74 years of the NHS, but also the first hospital here in the capital to get 5G. Bethlehem Royal Hospital in South London is the first to take part in a series of trials investigating the efficiency, safety and benefits of using smart technologies in the medical arena. Well, Mike Smith, who is involved in the project, spoke to me earlier about the landmark anniversary and how the technology could impact NHS services.
We're really excited by the opportunities that 5G can present, and this programme is going to prove the benefits to healthcare professionals and then in turn, of course, to patient outcomes, and give the NHS the information and the learnings they need to figure out how and when can this kind of fantastic technology to be deployed more nationally. So a really exciting day.
It's a huge rollout. When we talk about some of the perhaps benefits of how the NHS and medical services could benefit from this, what are they? What does that actually look like on the ground?
5G service, as you might expect, is the next stage on from 3G and 4G. And what that means is super fast and super reliable. And then when you combine that with a private network, and that means only authorized users, only using mission critical applications, what that means is all that power, all that speed can be dedicated to things that matter most. And then what that means in terms of use cases, on the ground things, the things I can relate to. I'm not really a technologist, but what makes sense to me. So if somebody's doing a patient observation by somebody's bedside, what they can do is record that real time on a connected device, rather than having to invest the time to go back to the station and type it all up, which is, of course, time they then can't spend with patients. Or maybe an example of a doctor knowing where an ECG machine is at any time, anywhere within the hospital. I think having that information, knowing it's operational and available, can make a real difference to patient outcomes.
Yeah, it sounds like it could save quite a lot of time. One thing that it perhaps won't be saving, though, is money. It's a huge investment to roll out something like this. What do you think the future is? Or are there any future plans that you're aware of how this could be rolled out across the country? Will it be rolled out? And also, are we in a financial position post-pandemic to be able to support something like this?
Well, this project is all about trying to demonstrate the benefits and capture the learnings. And once those benefits have been established, the full kind of cost benefit of the programme can be considered. And then it's up for the team at the NHS to figure out how and when these technologies can be deployed nationally. What we're really excited, though, about is the range of benefits and patient outcomes that this technology can support. It's a really, really exciting step forward, I think, for the NHS.
Yeah, Mike, I can't have you on without asking about some of the things that people are perhaps a little bit nervous about when it comes to 5G. There have been debates in the past about the sort of health worries around installing this kind of technology, especially in somewhere like a hospital where people might already not be feeling very well. Is this a sign that perhaps that's not the case and that people are now overlooking that, or are those worries still there?
Well, 5G is safe. Virgin Media O2 is working with a range of organisations, World Health Organization and Mobile UK, to make sure people have the facts about 5G and the facts about health.
Well, that was Mike Smith talking about the first hospital to get 5G here in the capital. today, which also happens to be the NHS's 74th birthday. Now, a workshop is taking place later this month to help open doors to the job market for people affected by homelessness. Creative Futures is a 2-day job fair and is the first project of its kind, including work placements, shadowing and the potential for work opportunities offered at the end of it. Well, it's taking place in Shoreditch on the 20th and 27th of July. Henry has been speaking to one of the organisers about the project.
There's one area that we know is very much in demand is actually getting work placements, work experience, work shadowing in the creative industries. You know, it's a real desire of people who maybe have got that talent but just don't have that access to those routes into employment in that way. And so we've set up Creative Futures to solve that problem, but also to break down those existing barriers, you know, and that's not just for our participants, but for the industry itself.
I believe it's the first project of its kind. So can you tell me a little bit more about what people can see and do in the workshop?
What it's going to be, it's over 2 days, and our participants, people with experience of homelessness who've attended our workshops, will be able to get portfolio reviews, have industry people looking at their work. They'll get training on, you know, how to network, how to present yourself, how to talk about your work. There'll be confidence building workshops. So, you know, that's the first day, which is actually sort of preparing them for what will be the second day. And on that second day, we've got representatives from the creative industries, specifically from the design and advertising sectors, who are going to come in and talk about their businesses and what they can offer. And any business that is attending Creative Futures has to offer something, has to be like a work placement, job shadowing, you know, doing a workshop in the business premises. So these are sort of like soft entry routes into employment. So our participants can get access to that world, see how they, you know, cope and function in that environment, and open up those doors. And so those doors will be opened not based on somebody's degree qualification or where they did their degree, but it will be based on that person and what they've got to offer.
Just how hard is it then for people, for example, affected by homelessness to get a job, to kickstart their life again?
Well, it's hard anyway. You know, I mean, we're talking with the creative industries, you're talking about a very networked world. It's highly qualified, and unfortunately it's not as diverse as it maybe it could be. So, you know, you've got barriers that exist anyway. But taken as a whole, if you're an individual and you maybe not got a track record, you know, CV or, you know, qualifications, no prior education or, you know, education or employment experience, your barriers are going to be even greater. So however much you may want to actually enter the workforce, you're going to be, you know, stigmatized from day one in that way. The industries that we've spoken to really want to engage with this audience. They're really aware that you know, diversity is good for their business, but also they could be doing more. You know, a tick box on the corporate strategy document is just not enough. You know, so this is their way of saying we're going to open up our businesses to this sort of community, and hopefully break down those barriers. You know, those barriers that exist and that are, you know, either, you know, conceived as such or actually do really happen. So this is our way of actually enabling those two communities to meet, people who are homeless and creative industries that want to offer opportunities in their workplace.
Let's delve into some of those barriers, because I think for people affected by homelessness, the one that often comes up is that they don't have a home, they don't have an address. There's other things like they don't have a bank account. So those are the sort of standard ones. But what are some of the other ones, maybe more to do with the creative industries? I know you mentioned it's quite a networking industry, but what are some then that maybe are less well known?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think you're right. When people talk about, you know, this community who are affected by homelessness, they always think about street homeless, okay? And actually, you know, homelessness is much broader than that. It's people living in hostels, temporary accommodation, you know, refugees, very sort of precarious living accommodation. So I think that's, you know, if you understand that as a whole, people fleeing abuse, violence, whatever. And then you get this sort of cycle of negativity, and actually, however much you may want to help, there's this mindset that says they're not going to want me because of my situation and I've got nothing to offer. So that's why something like this project that we're running is hopefully going to, really sort of break that challenge down and actually get the industries to speak to people. It's a highly networked world. I mean, I know from my own background in the sector, the amount of opportunities I've got from just meeting people, chatting, swapping in those times, business cards or whatever. But, you've got to head through that. Well, if you're not at those places and you don't feel you've got anything to talk to people about and you've got nothing to show, because you just don't feel that your work is good enough, the idea that somebody's going to actually wake up one day and say, I'm going to go for that internship, work placement, I'm going to get on Instagram and try to contact people, is like zero. So you've got to put that helping hand in place. And that helping hand has got to be super approachable, super accessible. And what we're doing with Creative Futures is industry-led. It's not me saying this is what you need to do. It's industry coming in and saying, we're going to offer you this, we're going to offer you that. There's going to be speed networking. They can meet each other. You can see that spark. You can see that potential. And, hopefully we can actually make those job realities, a reality.
Well, that's Creative Futures, and it's on the 20th and 27th of July. You're watching London Live News with Tanya Francis. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break. Plus, tackling the issue of mental health in top-level football. We'll hear about Tigers, the new film on In the Capital Now.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
and welcome back. A reminder of our top story this evening. An inquiry into the death of Jermaine Baker has found that the unarmed father of two was lawfully killed by a firearms officer during a foiled prison break. However, the inquiry found police made numerous failings in the planning and execution of the operation. Well, Baker was fatally shot as he sat in the front passenger seat of a stolen car near Wood Green Crown Court in North London in 2015 by police who suspected he and the others in the car were about to free a dangerous prisoner from a custody van. Jermaine was unarmed at the time. He was shot by a specialist firearms officer who told the inquiry he thought Mr. Baker was reaching for a weapon. Well, after the verdict, Jermaine's mother said she could not understand the ruling given the amount of evidence she had heard over the last 2 months.
It's very contradictory. He says the Met has had multiple failings under this operation, but yet these failings do not contribute to cause Jermaine's death. That can't be okay, because a failing is a failing, a life is a life. That, to me, that contributes towards my son's death.
That was Jermaine Baker's mother there. Well, the Met Police have released a statement in regards to the ruling and have said the inquiry report criticises how the operation was carried out, but that these failures did not cause Mr. Baker's death, and the officer was reasonable to assume that someone in the vehicle would be armed. Well, since his death, the Met have made changes to how the firearms unit is run and how the officers are trained. Now, in other news, Downing Street have said Boris Johnson forgot that Chris Pincher was the subject of an official complaint. The former Deputy Chief Whip was accused of groping two men at a private members' club. The complaint was upheld but did not lead to any formal investigation or disciplinary action. Number 10 had previously claimed that Mr. Johnson had not been aware of any specific allegations after Mr. Pincher's dramatic resignation last week. But since, claims have come out that he was informed. A former civil servant at the Foreign Office, Lord MacDonald, has said Mr. Johnson was briefed in person. Following this, Paymaster General Michael Ellis spoke in Parliament when questioned about the mechanisms for upholding standards in public life.
But it is incumbent upon us not to prejudge these decisions. Ministers, public office holders, officials in all of their activities must maintain the confidentiality of those who wish to make complaints across the lifetime of their involvement. But let me say that no system can replace the fundamental importance of personal responsibility.
Well, Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner also spoke, saying that these latest disclosures revealed an ethical vacuum in the heart of Downing Street.
And there is one common fault, Mr. Speaker, with the system currently that the Minister spoke about, and that's the power that's granted by this Prime Minister. The Minister spoke about personal responsibility. Well, the Minister needs to remind the Prime Minister of his personal responsibility.
Now, a new film tackling the issue of mental health in top-level football has arrived in select cinemas across the capital. Tigers tells the true story of Martin Bengtsson, a promising young Swedish footballer who was given a contract at Italian side Inter Milan when he was just 16, only to leave after suffering from depression, before he retired at the age of just 19 in 2005 as a result of his mental health issues. Well, he's since become a journalist and has spoken about the broad issue of mental health in elite football, as there is still a lot of work to do across the board. Let's first take a look at a bit of the film.
Ma quanto l'hanno pagato? È un po' gracilino.
You will start in our Primavera team.
Åk ner och gör oss stolta.
At this level, talent, technique, speed, that's all secondary to something else. A desperation in the eyes that says, I'd rather die than fail.
I think the clubs should be better prepared. I mean, that's the main thing. That if you buy a young player for a lot of money, you still buy them for a lot of money. Then it should be in your interest to create an environment where they feel good, so they can perform better, basically. And this kind of understanding around how you create that environment, I think that have been lacking earlier, and maybe still are today in many clubs. You know, like what is needed for a young player when they come here, and who are they? What do they come from? Because it also differs who you are, and you can't just put the same on everything. And that there you have to be a little bit individualistic. Like what are their needs? Like what kind of person is this? Because you can have one player who comes, you know, from some place where, you know, you have not have water, or you have played on the streets, or you have, you know, your whole family depends on that you are here, and you have another player as me that come from a Western country, you know, who have another background, or, you know, it's different people, and they bring with them different questions around themselves and who they are. So they need to kind of work with that, the understanding of groups and who people are, if you put them in the same house. And then those things around education and language and so on are super important. And also to see, like, what does it to a person to be in this position where your life can change so drastically into you becoming a multimillionaire and playing in front of 50,000, 100,000 people? Or what does it do to you to run into arena in front of 80,000 people? Like, what does it do? You know, it's a great experience, but it can also be frightening for someone, or it can be, you know, it can be all kinds of things. So to deepen the psychological understanding around the players in this specific position, I think it's super important. And you have doctors for almost every bone in the body in a big club, in these big clubs, you know, for the legs, for the foot, for the arms, for the, you know, but very little for the soul and for the head, you know, very little. So they should, you know, put the effort and the money and the, you know, the resources into, you know, building up that, because then it will also give back on the pitch, on the performance.
Gets are expensive though. Why? Because everybody hates you already.
You want someone who is prepared to make sacrifices to get what he wants. We're giving you the chance. Every kid himself. Don't throw it away.
Every year, for example, I'm talking to. I have a lecture at the Swedish national, for the Swedish national teams, like the under that I played in, basically the under 17s and under 16s. So I'm regularly there every year. So I get the chance to talk to them and to the coaches, and it's part of their education, both the coaches and the players. And then, of course, I get the chance to talk to people who are actually in the same kind of situation as I was. And it differs. It differs. Some people are in England and they have a great time and very professional academy, or even in Italy or in Holland. And then there is some players who are in the same countries which feel it's terrible, which says that this is exactly how it is, as it showed in the movie or written about in my book. Nothing have changed, they say. So it's kind of, I think you still have a lot of big clubs out there who really need to work with this with their organization. Basically, it's an organization kind of issue and problem and topic. How do you organize your club, you know, in the best way?
Well, that's Tigers, and it's out now at Curzon cinemas across the capital. Right, stay with us. Coming up in the next part of the show, the evolution and impact of the fashion scene in Africa. We'll have more on the latest exhibition from the V&A.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello and welcome back to the final part of tonight's show. Now, a new exhibition celebrating African fashion opened at the V&A Museum. There's over 250 objects on display, and the showcase tells the history and the stories behind them, alongside personal insights from the designers. Well, the evolution of African fashion is also told through sketches, editorial spreads, photographs, film and catwalk footage. Well, let's take a look.
Africa Fashion is split across two floors in our galleries, and that reflects the two historical periods that we focus on. The ground floor focuses on the post-independence and liberation era, so the mid-1950s to the 1990s. The upper floor focuses on contemporary creatives. But the exhibition opens with a contemporary piece by Iman Aisi. It's a wonderful fuchsia pink silk suit that sets the pace for the exhibition. But for us, it's about mixing cultures. It's about crossing different fashion systems, and it's about troubling people's expectations of what African fashions are. So opening out onto the ground floor, you then start to enter the cultural renaissance section. So the independence era, within that, there was a galvanization of creativity across the arts, whether that's fashion, art and music. And so you encounter that in our exhibition through the really evocative William Greaves's Dakar Festival footage. It's a documentary that really places you in that mid-20th century moment. But then you also meet the vanguard designers of the day. So from Ghana, you have Kofi Ansah with his wonderful use of embellished denim and kente. You also have designers like Chris Seydoux working in Bogolan Fini, Mudcloth, but also creating these fabulous ball gowns. So all of the creatives on the continent that we feature in the contemporary floor, they have this wonderful creativity and agility, this innovative nature about them. The groupings on the contemporary floor came from conversations with them. So on the one hand, there are the minimalist designers for whom it's all about architectural line, clean cutting, asymmetry, minimal use of colour. So you have them, the minimalists on the one hand, then you have the mixologists on the other, where it's all about mixing different cultural references, mixing texture, mixing pattern. So just the reordering that happened, political reordering that took place during the Cultural Renaissance and the independence moment, we really addressed that through the artistic expressions that came out of that moment. So on the one hand, there are independence cloths. So there are commemorative cloths that commemorate independence, whether that's the end of the apartheid system, for example, or there are, the William Greaves film that looks at the Dakar Festival, the first festival of black art that took place in 1966, which for many is the zenith of the Cultural Renaissance. So when we address these political issues or these political moments, these political contexts, it's through the lens of creativity and the arts with fashion. Well, I think it is an important and timely exhibition for many reasons. I think that the contemporary African fashion scene is so innovative, so impactful, that it cannot be ignored. And you see that across art, music, and fashion, African creativity. It's really making such an impact globally. So it's wonderful to be part of the team, or to be leading the team that's been able to give a platform to African creatives on the continent to showcase their work in a way that they would like it to be showcased. So it marks a moment of transition, I think, and an important moment that gives us a glimpse of the glamour and politics of the whole scene. But also it's about having one eye on the future and pointing to a future in which you might all thrive, in which we might all acknowledge African creativity, acknowledge it and appreciate it and celebrate it in a conscious and mindful way. So the groupings of designers on the contemporary creatives mezzanine floor, the stories that we tell around them came out of the conversations that we had. So the groupings, whether it's mixology, minimalist, artisanal, showing the mark of the hand, co-creation, that all came out of the conversations. But I do think that perhaps the most cutting edge section is the Afrotopia section. And this is really where narrative fashion or storytelling through fashion really comes into its own. Because the designers in this section really use their work as a mouthpiece with which to comment on political issues, whether that's LGBTQ plus rights, through Rich Menese's Pride collection, for example. This is a sort of a zebra print that's become a signature to Rich Menese's collection, but represented using the colours of the Pride flag. And you also have designers like Sindiso Khumalo, a women's wear designer, that uses her work to shine a light on the absence of Black women within history. So there's the Harriet Tubman-inspired collection, inspired by the abolitionist, the African-American abolitionist Harriet Tubman. There's a fabulous quilt suit that's based on the quilts that used to be hung outside the safe houses along the railroad to freedom. So these are the designers that I think are really, they're making fabulous work. It's this fabulous fashion, beautifully cut, really alluring, really draws you in. You want to wear it, but then it also has a deeper meaning or a message to convey. So really, really exciting work.
Well, that exhibition is on until April next year, so you've got lots of time to check it out. Now, Ice is the inspiration behind a new exhibition of photographs, paintings and video by artist Dawn Ng. She uses pigments and captures them bleeding into each other to create her work. Well, after building a successful career in Asia, the Into Air collection is her first solo show here in London, and it's being held in the backdrop of a church in Marylebone. Let's have a look.
I think the best way to talk about it is to really talk about my practice. So much of my practice is centered around time, memory, and the ephemeral. And Into Air is no different. It's anchored in that. It's anchored in this trying to hold on to certain moments because I believe they always exist and are no more. Into Air really, was born from a desire to give time an alternative language other than numbers, which we all know. It was trying to give time a color, shape, and form. And the best way that I thought this was possible was to sort of track its movement or its texture and path through an ephemeral object, and that object being ice, because, coming from Singapore, we live just off the equator where we have 365 days of intense, crazy summer. So ice becomes that very natural, ultimate ephemeral material that will not stay. And over the course of the past 3-4 years, through different means of photography, painting, and film, I've really tried to sort of track that movement of time through how do you create something that is, keeps resonating as it's flowing. And the third one with painting, I think that's the final journey of sort of that paint or residue going from ice back to nothingness, which is air. And really when all the pigments have melted, actually that becomes the material through which I use to paint. And the sheet of paper, which actually blankets the pigment, acts as a form of sieve. So it's actually the paint's last journey back from liquid to air. That is what, it's like catching a ghost. The paintings really feel that way for me. They're that last expression and explosion of pigment and color before it goes into nothingness again. The reason why the show was called Into Air was because throughout the past 4 years, what I've tried to do was to track time through that passage, that cyclical time passage from solid liquid to air. And I guess this body of work really looks at the way something can never be held. Time can never hold still, and it just keeps on changing physical form. And yet there's this act of disappearing that makes all things, I think, precious. And it's that capturing of those moments that I think are most poignant and most thoughtful at each stage of creating the work. Whenever I think about what the audience should take away, I think I just really want the audience to feel more than to think. I think the work is very, because of its colors and because everyone recognizes this, the universality of something not lasting, the feeling of death, beauty and death, and that really both futile yet absolutely essential need to hold on to the things that don't last. I think that's very instinctive, and I think I would love for people to just respond or feel for the work in that way. I think my favorite part of the works are probably the paintings, because they are so intrinsically linked to this idea of death. It is that final stage where the paint and all the water in the work goes back to nothing. And even in that last expression, I find it beautiful that there's this explosion of color. There's this way of how all the pigments, be it acrylics, which are more viscous, or inks, which are, they kind of bloom and form very beautiful topographies. They all seek to make a final statement, to say something, to expand across the sheet and to cling on. And I think that that's something so beautiful, even in its last gasp, as a body of work that has seen all these different stages, that in its final exit, it has, a beautiful picture to leave behind. As I mentioned before, growing up in Singapore and being, very close to the equator, ice always had such a magical quality to it. There are lots of, as children, you would just always play with ice from the freezer. And, in Singapore, we have lots of desserts that are about crushed ice and coloring with different flavors and pigments. And I think there's something about that childlike magic and wonder in the ice that has always brought me back to looking at it. And I think that the genesis of this work definitely started with something as simple as that, the curiosity around the beauty of something that cannot stay.
Well, that exhibition is on until the 23rd of this month. A reminder of the weather now. It's a fine evening ahead with temperatures dropping down to around 8 degrees overnight. Tomorrow will be a cloudy start, but will remain dry and will heat up as the day goes on, with lots of sunshine and highs of 25 degrees. Looking ahead, it's much of the same for Thursday and the weekend. Also looking like there'll be some warmer weather with light winds, so lots of nice weather to look forward to for the weekend. That's all from us this evening. Thanks for watching. Join us tomorrow at 6 for more news from across London. And until then, we'll have the latest across our social media channels at London Live. Have a lovely evening.